In 2022, the world's most powerful technology companies were doing fine. Google had search, Meta had social media, Microsoft had Excel, which is not exciting but is extremely profitable. Everyone had a lane. Everyone stayed in their lane. And then ChatGPT came out. And every one of these companies looked at their lane, and then looked at OpenAI, and then looked at their lane again, and collectively decided, we don't have a lane anymore. We have a problem. Within weeks, Google declared a code red. Within months, Meta announced it was pivoting to AI. Within a year, Microsoft had invested $13 billion into OpenAI. $13 billion. Into one company that most people had never heard of 6 months earlier. Hey. What? The billions that arrived overnight, and the panic that caused them. Let's talk about the money, because the money is absurd. In 2023, Microsoft invested $13 billion in OpenAI. Google invested $300 million in Anthropic, then invested another billion. Amazon invested $4 billion in Anthropic, then another $4 billion. Meta announced it would spend $65 billion on AI in 2025 alone. In 1 year. $65 billion. That is more than the GDP of several countries spent on AI in 12 months by one company that also runs a website where people argue about their high school reunion photos. Mark Zuckerberg, in a post about Meta's AI spending, wrote that a lot of people might question whether this was the right investment, that the risks were real, but that the risk of being left behind was even greater, which is a very calm way of saying, everyone is terrified. We are all spending enormous amounts of money, because the alternative is not spending enormous amounts of money, and nobody knows what happens then. Google versus OpenAI, the most expensive argument in tech history. Here is the remarkable irony at the center of the AI arms race. Google invented the transformer, the architecture that made ChatGPT possible, published it freely, in a paper called Attention is All You Need, which OpenAI read and built on, and used to make the product that nearly destroyed Google's core business. When this is pointed out to people inside Google, they do not find it funny. Google's response to ChatGPT was to rush out a competing product called Bard, which launched in February 2023, in a promotional tweet, where it got a factual question about the James Webb Space Telescope wrong, posted publicly, for everyone to see. Alphabet's stock dropped 9% that day. That is approximately $100 billion of market value. Gone. Because of one wrong answer. In a tweet that could have been checked. By Googling it. Google regrouped, renamed Bard to Gemini, hired more AI researchers, spent more money, got better. But the moment had already happened. The company that had arguably invented modern AI had been caught flat-footed by the thing it invented, which is either the greatest irony in technology history, or a very expensive lesson about the difference between inventing something and shipping it. Meta joins the race, with surprisingly different vibes. Then there's Meta, Facebook's parent company, the social media giant, the company that, in 2021, had bet its entire future on virtual reality. Remember the metaverse? The thing where Mark Zuckerberg spent $10 billion on a virtual world where nobody went? Right. That. Quietly discontinued. Now, AI. But here's where Meta's approach was genuinely different. While OpenAI and Google were building closed systems, models you could only access through their products, Meta decided to go open source. They released their AI model, LLaMA, publicly. Free to download, free to use, free to modify. Anyone could run it on their own computer. Researchers, developers, small companies, people in countries that couldn't afford OpenAI's prices. Zuckerberg wrote, "I believe it would unlock more progress if the ecosystem were more open." His critics noted that Meta also happened to benefit enormously from having the most capable open source model. Because if everyone is building on LLaMA, everyone is building on Meta's foundation, which is either a generous gift to humanity or the most sophisticated long game in corporate history. The chip problem nobody told you about until it became a geopolitical crisis. Here is the thing nobody was talking about in 2022. and everyone was talking about in 2023. AI doesn't run on ideas. AI runs on chips, specifically Nvidia chips, and there aren't enough of them, not even close. Training a frontier AI model requires tens of thousands of the most powerful processors on Earth, running simultaneously, for months, in warehouses that consume as much electricity as small cities. This created a problem. Every major tech company needed the same chips, at the same time, from the same company, which is the supply chain equivalent of every restaurant in New York trying to order ingredients from one farm. In 2023, Nvidia's H100 chips had a waiting list measured in months. Companies were paying double and triple the list price on secondary markets. Microsoft, Google, Meta, and Amazon were all building massive new data centers, each one requiring enormous amounts of power, water, and land, in places that didn't necessarily want enormous data centers, or had the power grid to support them. Sam Altman estimated the world would need to spend several $trillion on AI infrastructure over the next few years. Several $trillion for infrastructure, for AI. And then governments started paying attention. The part where governments realized they should probably be involved in this. In 2022, AI was mostly a tech industry story. In 2023, it became a geopolitical story. Because governments noticed something. The countries that control AI infrastructure will have enormous advantages. Economic advantages, military advantages, intelligence advantages, the ability to process information faster, make decisions faster, automate systems faster than countries that don't. The United States government noticed this, and also noticed that the most advanced AI chips in the world were being manufactured in Taiwan, one island, that China considers part of its territory. The implications of this were not subtle. So the US passed the CHIPS Act, $52 billion to build semiconductor manufacturing back on American soil. The European Union launched the EU AI Act, the world's first comprehensive AI regulation. China announced massive state investment in AI, with a target to become the world's leading AI power by 2030, which is the kind of sentence that gets very serious people in very serious rooms, very focused, very quickly. The race that started in a Denny's in San Jose was now being run by governments, with defense budgets. In 2022, the AI race was about products. ChatGPT versus Bard, OpenAI versus Google, Silicon Valley companies competing for users. By 2024, it was about something else entirely. Infrastructure, chips, power grids, data centers, national strategy. Every major government on Earth was now involved in a race they had largely ignored until someone built a chatbot that could write better than their employees. The United States, China, the European Union, the United Kingdom. All of them suddenly very interested in a technology that, 5 years ago, mostly lived in academic papers and research labs. The money being spent is staggering. The stakes being described are existential. And in the middle of all of it, a small number of very powerful companies are making decisions that will affect every human being on Earth, without asking. Because nobody agreed on who should be asked, or how, or what the rules should be. The next superpower might not be defined by armies, but by algorithms. And somewhere in this race, amid the billions, the chips, the data centers, the government hearings, the corporate rivalries, a very important question was getting louder. Not, who will win? But, should anyone be allowed to win without limits? That question had one very prominent spokesperson. The same British-Canadian scientist we mentioned last episode, the one who quit Google, who spent his career building the foundations of all of this, and who was now traveling the world with a very specific warning. Okay, we really need to hear what he has to say.